Welcome to Grove Counseling. We are excited you joined us this month. So if you haven't watched one of these videos before, we are going to have a monthly video from Grove Counseling to encourage you, encourage where you're at, encourage you in your growth, in your mental health, wherever you happen to be. So for the next few months, we are going to look at the power of story. To be specific, the power of your story. We all have a story. We all have a testimony that God is writing and shaping in each of us. Some of it has highlights, joy, exciting moments. Some of it's about the pain that we walk through and the lessons we learn along the way. But writing your testimony, if you've never done this, is a very important part of your journey as a person, as a Christian, and even as someone who's recovering from pain, hurts, habits, and hang-ups along the way. So what you're about to see is me reading my testimony. It's something I took time to write, to process, to pray over. And it's important for you to hear it because it's what God's doing in my life and through me. Maybe you'll relate to a lot of it. Maybe you won't, but either way, our stories have power and God uses them in other people's lives as well. My name is Matt, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with anger and people-pleasing. This has been a very difficult process to get to the point of writing my testimony. I speak to people a lot. In fact, I even share personal stories about my past a lot as well. But there was just something about sitting down and writing this testimony. I felt a lot of resistance. The people-pleaser part of me wanted it to be perfect, but also doesn't believe that I have much to offer. You see, I look at my story and I downplay it. I felt my whole life that I have a boring testimony that won't make an impact. So why should I take the time to craft it and write it and even share it? Perhaps I should add self-doubt to the list of things I struggle with. I believe that anger and the people-pleasing and even the self-doubt comes from somewhere deep within me. My story really all revolves around this desire I have somewhere deep in me to be enough. I want to be enough. I want to make people proud. I want to matter. And this has resulted in a person that does a lot to appear well put together, nice, calm, and collected. But underneath, I'm scared that I'll be rejected and alone. The old me. It all started when I was in preschool. I went to this preschool called Sandcastles. I don't remember much about it other than the epic name, except for one story that my mom always told me. You see, I had a teacher at Sandcastles that I really connected with. Her name was Jane, and Jane would send me home with Jesus coloring pages. The problem was, this was a public preschool, and Jane wasn't supposed to be witnessing to preschoolers. My mom actually went to church at this point, but something about Jane doing this truly bothered her. She came in one day to confront Jane, and Jane quickly diffused her anger with what I believe now to be a prophetic word that she declared over my life. She told my mom, Matt is going to do big things for God in his life. There's something about him that God is going to use in amazing ways. This is the story that my mom told me growing up. When I was sad or feeling down, it felt pretty good. Maybe a little bit intimidating to know how to live up to those words. But I carried it as this hope for my life that someone believed in me. Years later, perhaps even in the last 15 years or so, my mom told me what Jane said next all those years ago. Her prophecy came with a warning of sorts. She went on to say, but he will be followed by a spirit of rejection for his entire life. Now, maybe you see why my mom didn't lead with this part of the story. A true buzzkill, to say the least. But when she finally allowed me to hear that part of the story, it literally put my entire life into perspective. You see, I felt that very spirit of rejection my entire life. I've had an amazing life, and I in no way want to be too dramatic at this point in my story. But where my anger comes from, where my people-pleasing and bouts of self-doubt come from, stems from this nagging, horrible feeling that I've felt at many twists and turns along the way. Why do people look past me? Why do I get left out, ignored, or forgotten about? What do I do with that? And what's God's message to me in that? Growing up through elementary school and especially in high school, I often found myself being lonely and left out. People who have been bullied and picked on have it incredibly rough. I truly hate bullying, and I do what I can to stamp it out when I see it. But I had a different yet equally lonely experience. You see, I wasn't picked on, I was ignored. I went through much of high school feeling like I knew who people were, but none of them knew me. I was invisible, never invited to hang out, never beyond the moments in high school where they had to interact with me. I remember a project I did in English with several Christians in my senior class of high school. They were the cool Christians, all going to the same very large youth group in town. I wanted to be a part of their circle, or at least I wanted them to consider me a cool Christian too. I remember seeing them outside of school one time and they acted like they didn't even know who I was. This was one moment I would always remember, and one of the reasons I would later become a youth pastor. I went to college to become a youth pastor, and I focused on youth ministry. I wound up being a youth pastor for 12 years. Those students added so much to my life, and I feel I had an opportunity to speak truth to them, where I had believed lies for too often in my youth. I wanted to help other kids who might also feel invisible know that they are seen. They matter. They have a future. God has a plan for their life, and He would never make them feel invisible or ignored. So back to my childhood. So I would consider myself a very compliant person. I try to play by the rules, and I try to do what is asked of me in all situations. That being said, I was a pretty good kid. And I had parents who loved me and wanted me to succeed. But that rejection and the fear of more rejection caused me to play it safe a lot. I was very nice, yet somehow forgettable to people. In my own family, I embraced my role as oldest son and would take on the responsibility given to me as the oldest to the best of my ability. I was responsible, but I had this boiler of anger that just had an uncanny ability to boil over at the weirdest and most embarrassing times. My anger came out sideways, and it never actually boiled over during important moments, but rather at the most inopportune and unnecessary moments. I remember having to explain to friends who would come play video games with me why my controllers always rattled when they held it. I threw my controllers on the ground whenever I would get frustrated and angry while playing. I remember breaking a broomstick over my knee, breaking 2 or 3 golf clubs as well, and I tried to lie about it to cover it up. Countless other items that I broke in fits of rage. It was that thing in the closet of my life I didn't want anyone to know about. I never hit people or threw things at people, but it became an embarrassing skeleton into adulthood. The week of my wedding, I got annoyed as I got out of my car and I pounded my fist into the hood of my car, leaving an obvious dent. Why? Why did I do this? It's stupid, juvenile, embarrassing. It does nothing to help the situation. I realized that this anger was the thing I was most ashamed of, that I hope people I came in contact with would never see. I was trapped. It was trapped in me. And when it came out, I always felt shame close behind. I read recently that anger comes from one of 3 places: hurt, frustration, or fear. More than likely, my anger has stemmed from all 3 of these places, or a combination of the 3, through the duration of my whole life. It comes out sideways. The thing that sets me off is usually not what led me to the boiling point at all. It may be hurt that I wasn't invited to the party and that a lot of my friends and coworkers are posting about on social media. It may be frustration that nobody truly sees how hard I work or how much I pour into what I do and how fiercely I attempt to love and help other people. Or maybe it's fear that I will be ignored again, that I won't matter again, or that all this will not be enough and I'll disappoint those ones that I love the most. My anger and the self-sabotage that can go with it almost cost me the relationship that is most near and dear to my heart. When I was dating Rachel, who is now my wife, my anger rose to the top. I was so hurt and frustrated from my past rejections. I was walking around like a ticking time bomb with her, just waiting to blow up. None of the things I was angry about were really about her. They were past pains that I refused to deal with and admit. It was that old wound and fear that I wouldn't be enough and that I truly didn't matter, rearing its ugly head, attempting to take down a relationship that I had been praying for my entire life. You see, I knew the moment I met Rachel that she was the woman I'd been searching for to share my life with. She was funny, a little dorky, kind, and patient. But that tired narrative in the back of my mind told me I didn't deserve that, and that she would leave me the second she saw me get angry. Little did I know that anger was pretty much the one thing she couldn't tolerate. She had promised herself two things. She wouldn't marry an angry person, and she wouldn't marry a pastor, and I was both. It reached a breaking point through a series of frustrating conversations where I was angry and really had no reason why. I eventually gave her an out. You should just break up with me already. You deserve so much better. I honestly thought that would be the end of it. But she came back to me the next day and told me that she loved me and felt that God was calling her to be by my side, to be my calming presence, to not give up on me because he had called us together for a reason. My experience in growth. Maybe this is what I've been waiting to hear my entire life. Not a day goes by that I don't thank God for her not giving up on us. But I still had a long way to go, and I still do. I remember when it came time for our first daughter to be born, a new fear rushed over me that was very familiar to an old fear. What if the child doesn't like me? I said this for weeks. What if I'm not enough for her too? As a dad, what if I let her down? What if I couldn't give her everything she needs to succeed? Or worse yet, what if she inherits my anger or my spirit of rejection? And in some ways, I do see those similar traits in her now that she's a little older. I have 3 daughters now, and they are all special. I want them to know the truth, not to believe the lies of shame. God continues to remind me, so I continue to remind them. You are loved. No matter what happens, no matter how hurt, afraid, or frustrated you become, you are loved. And God has a plan for your life. Jeremiah 29:11 has long been one of my favorite verses. And to be honest, I've long taken it a bit out of context. You see, Jeremiah was the weeping prophet. During a difficult time in Israel's history, they were exiled. And this verse came during a time where they would still be exiled for a lot longer. 70 years, in fact. God's message to them was to plant a garden, put down roots, because they were just going to be exiled a while. And I relate to this in my life. The rejection that I sometimes feel, maybe I won't be the first pick. Maybe I won't stand out in the crowd. Maybe people will even forget my name or not realize I exist. But rescue is coming. To the Israelites, they would have to sit in it for a while. But right after this slightly depressing fact, God gives Jeremiah these hopeful words that ring true to us today as well. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. Jeremiah 29:11-14. I love that. There's always hope. God offers that hope when I feel hopeless at my own hands. And even when I've seen my anger flare up in recent days, I know that instead of shaming myself back into the corner, like I've always done in the past, I must humbly own my actions, apologize, make amends, and move forward. I'm still working on it, but I choose to have that same level of grace for myself as I have with others. I am not my mistakes. I am not my successes. I am loved. I am enough. And I matter because God loves me for who I am. Living each day in light of that and choosing to believe it and trust it on my weekdays is key to my recovery and my future growth. So the new me. In the last year that I have been actively working on my recovery at Celebrate Recovery, there are a couple things I've learned. I've learned that it's so important for me to believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he's with me. His word says in Matthew 5:4, happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And I also need to choose every single day to turn over my entire life, my entire will to him, to his control, and to his very able care. Matthew 5:5a says, happy are the meek. You see, believing that I matter to God, truly believing that my affirmation comes from him and him alone is key for me. The fact is, sometimes I need to mourn when I feel that all too familiar sting of rejection. I need to feel it, but trust that God doesn't see me that way. I matter to him. He loves me, and he truly does have a plan for my life. I desire to help other people feel like they matter and remind them that they matter to God and and he has a purpose for their lives. I can't fully do that if I'm running from the spirit of rejection or even moping or stewing in the frustration of being left out yet again. The last thing I want to do is let my Eeyore mode, that donkey from Winnie the Pooh, thanks for noticing. I can't let that lock me up and prevent me from being used in the blessing of those around me. The second piece for me that I've learned from Celebrate Recovery is that I need to choose to commit my life and that Jesus cares for me and that he needs to have the control. So my question, do I believe he cares? That he's actively caring for me? 1 Peter 5:6-7 says this in the Passion Translation. If you bow low in God's awesome presence, he will eventually exalt you as you leave the timing in his hands. Pour out all your worries and stress upon him and leave them there, for he always tenderly cares for you. I'm learning to do this more and more every day. I'm great at preaching this message. I'm great at even teaching it to my own children. I'll be the first person to tell my wife, Rachel, to trust God, to not worry so much, but I'm not so great at listening to those words myself. But really, they're not my words. They're God's words and his daily reminder to me. For me, I may not worry about money. I may not worry about what's coming next. Rather, I just worry about mattering and being enough for the ones I'm called to love. And even that needs to be given to God as he tenderly cares for me and heals my wounds on a daily basis. So teaching lessons at CR, hearing the open shares, even celebrating milestones with chips and coins with people has helped put this journey in perspective for me. I look forward to Monday nights when we have Celebrate Recovery here at the Grove, because that's when I get to see my friends. That's when I see us all being real with one another about our hurts, our habits, and our hang-ups. We are healing in front of each other, in front of each other's eyes. And it happens one honest share, one realization, one breakthrough at a time. So if you've never been a part of our Celebrate Recovery, or it's a new concept for you and you're at the very beginning steps of your recovery journey, whatever it is you're recovering from, let me encourage you. You coming to Celebrate Recovery is something I pray for on a weekly basis. There's a victory in just coming in the door. And you've probably felt resistance to getting that help you need. That's because it's just that important. The evil one doesn't want you to recover, but God does. So come to Celebrate Recovery and keep coming back. Listen to the lessons, share in the open shares, connect with other people, join a step study, and remember, you matter. You matter to God. So keep pursuing him. Even when you feel defeated and up against it, you're enough. This life isn't about a performance where we need to gain the affirmation of those around us to truly matter. You are enough just the way you are. Don't let shame, don't let the past, don't even let the present tell you that you don't matter, because it's simply not true. You're enough. But God also isn't done with you. He makes all things new. Being made new is a daily process, and he's faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. Keep trusting, keep seeking, keep growing.